So thank you for the invitation, and thank you for this event. I think it's a nice and fruitful event because it shows how different perspectives of conservatives can and should be. The topic is Scruton's legacy. I got this topic on the organizers, and I think that it nicely adds to the dimensions that were already presented here and shows us the different perspectives that I mentioned earlier. I start to present my talk with a distinction between two forms of conservatism, political and intellectual. We have already heard that, in fact, conservatism can be something for ideal case scenarios, i.e. for theoretical discussions, and of course conservatism is a political issue. When I talk about either, I start out from Edmund Burke. I don't go back to the ancients for this moment. I start out from Edmund Burke. And just to give a few examples of what political conservatism might mean in the British conservative tradition, you see here some of the key players in that tradition: Benjamin Disraeli, Lord Salisbury, and Winston Churchill. But I will not talk about them, unfortunately. I don't know enough of them, but also my interest is in a different one. That's intellectual conservatism. It again starts out from Edmund Burke, but this time the key players for this tradition is Eliot, Oakeshott, and Scruton himself. Of course, that's my construction of the tradition. There are different understandings, so be as tolerant as possible with my own one. As for the scenario, we have to start out from the assumption that British conservatism is dead. That's my assumption, but I would be glad to hear your views on that. And I've got some arguments for that. The party itself suffered a devastating defeat. Its recent history since Brexit is a total failure, and its major policies are quite far away from what could be labeled as conservative in the intellectual sense of the word. And in fact, it has a very powerful rival by now, Farage's Reform UK party. And so far, this party has not found the answer to that challenge. There is a possible answer, the populist answer, and in fact, that would try to take Farage on face value and try to address that populism with the conservative populism. And I don't think that it really pays so far. You see the present stance of the different parties, and the conservatives are the third in this list so far. So I don't think that that's really something that is there for the conservatives. But of course, one has to keep in mind that in fact this is of course on the move, and it's also partly determined by my own prejudices, which you will certainly see soon. The British populist turn of the Conservative Party is of course not without parallels in Europe. In fact, there is a kind of populist challenge all over Europe by now. I'm saying this in Vienna, of course, coming from Budapest, of course, and keeping in mind also Italy. So this is indeed a geographical location. We were talking about the Habsburg monarchy, so that's something that is interesting in that context as well. But the case is there as well in the US. There is what I would call a techno-populist and post-liberal challenge in the US as well. And of course the two figures beyond the by now president, second time President Trump, is Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, the techno-populist and the post-liberal challenger. And I would like to argue why this is not the right track for, from the perspective of intellectual conservatism. And I will start out from what Scruton has to say about Trump. And he admits that he was not aware of the power. We were talking about power already. He was not aware of the power of Trump's challenge to the existing political elites in Washington. But he has got serious problems with the achievement of Trump. He was referring to the first presidency of Trump. He claims that Trump is a product of the cultural decline that is rapidly consigning our artistic and philosophical inheritance to oblivion. And he adds, the principal reason for doubting Mr. Trump's conservative credentials is that he is in fact a creation of social media. He has lost the sense that there is a civilization out there. That's a very powerful claim, and of course we need to discuss it, but that's Scruton's position. And keep in mind, he is criticizing Trump because he is out of what he claims the model of civilization that he belongs to. Now we have got Scruton's account of Prime Minister Orban as well, and it's interesting to compare the two. Why? Because of course there is a similarity between the approaches of the two of them, President Trump and Mr. Orban, and we know that they are on friendly terms with each other. Orban has already visited California, the then President-elect Trump, just to discuss policies or strategies. Now, Scruton is apparently less critical about Orban. What he says is that if you come to Hungary, if you come here, you find a civilized country. And the people here don't look like they are mourning the yoke of a tyrant. So apparently the same standard is used, civilization. And the claim is that Orban's Hungary is still preserving the sort of civilization that he thinks conservatism should refer to. And keep in mind that, again, in the earlier one, he criticized Trump for the role education, culture, religion, marriage and the family plays in his first presidency. Of course, it was about the first one. But Scruton has his own criticisms concerning Orban. In 2016, Scruton defended George Soros by petitioning Orban's government not to close the Soros-funded Central European University. This is from the Spectator World 2019. And that's an interesting thing. Of course, by now, Central European University is here. But the issue is, of course, academic freedom and the freedom to teach what you think is true. And this is a picture just a month before Scruton died at the Hungarian embassy. If you came closer, you would see my face in the crowd over there. And of course, the important faces are Prime Minister Orban cheering Scruton, by then terminally ill with cancer, and receiving the decoration from the Prime Minister of Hungary as an expression of his evaluation of his work. And what's that evaluation about? I quote Prime Minister Orban: Sir Roger Scruton is a man of practice and not of abstractions. So this is a different sort of a person than the gain on time that we heard about earlier. This is a man of action and of practice. And in particular, He was an ardent and active ally to anti-communist forces in Central and Eastern Europe before 1990. So the real practical achievement belongs to that era when he came over to first to Czechoslovakia, then to Poland, then to Hungary, and even to Romania to try to help intellectuals as well as students and workers to get acquainted with the cultural tradition of the West, which was not available in those days for them in certain areas. So, what comes from all these considerations as far as Scruton's legacy? Because that's the issue that I have to address today. I claim that Scruton has certain things to say for present-day British conservatives when conservatism is dead in Britain. And these are the fields or the issues or the agenda that might be relevant from his perspective. Architecture and urbanism, environmentalism based on local autonomies, oikophilia, that culture counts, this insight that culture counts, and finally, and perhaps most importantly, the relevance of intellectual conservatism. And that's an issue which is particularly important, I think, for us here. Let's start with the first one. He was, Roger Scruton was a Cambridge-educated person, and his PhD was on aesthetics, on the philosophy of art. And he had interest in two fields of art, architecture and music especially. But in architecture he had a role in the last year of his life. He was the president of the commission building Better, Building Beautiful. And that commission has finally written its report. And that is perhaps the most practically surviving document of his work, because that's still on the agenda of the Conservative Party, and it was on the agenda of the Conservative government after Sir Roger's death in 2020. And there, the idea is a very simple one. Beauty matters. That's the claim. i.e., if you need regulations in architecture, one of the key dominant factors of that regulation needs to be that architecture is to be beautiful. That's a key issue. Why? Because if it's not beautiful, you will not feel at home in that place. And in fact, that will not be a place in the general or the original meaning of the term. Place is where you feel at home. And you only feel at home when you feel that you are in a beautiful environment. Just look around. Do you feel here at home or not? That's the key issue that he raises. In every regulation, you have to keep a place for the beautiful.
Like here.
Yes. Second issue, environmentalism. He published a book with the title Green Philosophy, which apparently is not a conservative topic. And one of his key claims was that, in fact, environmentalism is a conservative issue. Why? Because what is a conservative issue if not to conserve our natural and built environment? What else is a conservative issue if not that? And the key to that, he claims, is not through the state. That's the crucial thing. You are on a wrong track if you try to save the environment by more state activity. What you need is civil initiatives and local autonomies. That's the subsidiarity aspect of his environmentalism. And it's also connected to the love of beauty that I talked about earlier. Why? Because if people have an environment which is beautiful, they will love it and they will take it as a home. And if that environment is in its proper shape, it will be beautiful. And it will not be beautiful as soon as it's distorted, it's corrupted, it's not preserved in its original form. So you have to keep your environment as you were given by the earlier generations and earlier by the creation of God. It's a shared resource and you have to be a guardian of it. And that leads us to the third concept, maybe the most important one in his late thought, oikophilia, the love of place. This is not an ancient term. It's created by him. But it sounds like ancient, and it has a sense which the ancients should have shared, which is that you have to love your home, or if you live a natural life, you will live a life that adores your environment, and you will keep an eye on it and keep it in its original form. And he claims that this idea, the love of home, is something that the Tory party has not addressed, and that he finds it astonishing. Astonishing that the Conservative Party has not seized hold of that cause as its own. And how could it have been done? What's the policy that would fit an argument that a human being is one who is based on a certain location and on the love of that certain location? The idea here is that in fact human nature is created in a way that we can only live fully developed, flourishing life if we have an attachment to a locality. And most naturally it's the one that we were born to. But if that's not possible, we have to be more creative and find the home where we want to live and where we want to bring up our family, our children. He did not come from a particularly lucky family background. He had very strong tensions and conflicts with his father, but he created his own family in the later part of his life, and that's where he got married. That's where he brought up his children, and that's the place that survived his death, and that place is still along the lines that he wanted it to see. And we arrive to the two final points. One is that culture counts. This is the title of his book, and it is a crucial issue. We have to realize that the sort of conservatism that he was up to was based on this simple idea that culture is upstream from politics. That's the thing that you have to keep in mind. And that's where cultural conservatism, intellectual conservatism comes into the picture. You can take it negatively, culture, and that's the earlier assumption, in fact, of the Tories. Tories were widely acclaimed to be the stupid party. That's the term that was used by John Stuart Mill, the great friend of the Tories, and of course one of the founding fathers of present-day liberalism. He claimed that party is the stupid party. Why? Because he had good reasons to do so. That's because British conservatives really did not like culture and did not like conservatism along intellectual lines. Why? Because they claimed that that's not the way politics should be handled. We should not trust academics, intellectuals, journalists, all those people who have got very nice ideas but who don't know anything about reality. So that's why Mill thought that this is a non-debatable issue. But Scruton, who once in his life actually wanted to, made an effort to join the party, became an intellectual conservative, and therefore he felt quite lonely in Britain among conservatives as well as among academics. Either intellectuals or conservatives regarded him as, not part of our game. But we can take, so that's the negative approach to the issue of culture that we can associate with the conservatives. But there is a more positive one. Again, take Edmund Burke. And Burke's praise of the cultural heritage of the country, i.e. that politics need to take into account its heritage, that it needs to preserve that heritage, and no politics can be legitimate, and again we are returning to the issue of authority and legitimacy as opposed to sheer power. No power can be legitimate and authoritative which disregards the cultural heritage, and therefore the national and local heritage is the capital on which we have to build our politics. Final slide. Intellectual conservatives count. Of course, this is a claim that conservative politicians would not sign. So don't ask them about that. But we among ourselves should understand that this is the case. Culture is the basis of politics because it's upstream from politics, as we mentioned earlier. And that does not mean that what we need to do is just keep on fighting the culture war. What is required instead is a kind of understanding that conservatism is based on two pillars of culture: common sense and high culture. The two things should not be separated, should not be cut away from each other. Instead, what is required is a policy, a political agenda which connects the two, high culture and common sense. That's the key, according to the legacy of Sir Roger Scruton, of a well-ordered society and of a politics that keeps the tradition alive and is still practical. He does not write for eternity. He writes for the present generation, what to do in the present situation. The well-being of a society is as much affected by the state of the one, high culture, as it is by the state of the other, common culture or common sense. These are the two pillars of our tradition, and we have to keep that alive. Thank you very much.